During the Ice Age, human strength was not just the size of muscle, it was the strength to move through cold land, carry weight, endure hunger, recover from strain, and keep going when the body had very little protection from the world around it. But the deeper question is not only how humans survived that kind of life. It is what began to happen after survival slowly became less brutal, after the old pressures no longer touched the body in the same way every day. Somewhere between hardship, invention, safety, and time, an older kind of human strength began to fade from ordinary life. So what did humans lose after the Ice Age, and why did we never fully get it back? Why humans lost their Ice Age strength and never got it back? When we hear the words Ice Age strength, it is easy to imagine something simple and dramatic. We may picture a heavier body, thicker arms, a harder face, a person made almost entirely for struggle. But that picture is too narrow, and it can lead us in the wrong direction. The strength that matters here was not only the kind that can be measured by one lift, one fight, or one short burst of power. It was a quieter kind of strength, spread through the whole body, shaped by ordinary days that were not ordinary by our standards. It lived in the legs that had to keep moving across uneven ground. It lived in the feet that met cold soil, stone, mud, slope, ice, and broken roots without the clean flatness of a modern floor. It lived in the hands that held rough tools, pulled material, carried food, scraped hides, shaped wood, gathered plants, and touched the world directly. It lived in the back and hips that had to balance weight without wheels, handles, chairs, or perfect paths. And it lived in the breath, because a body that walks far, waits long, shivers, climbs, bends, and stands under weather must learn a different rhythm from a body that spends most of its life protected indoors. None of this means that every person in that colder world was powerful in the same way. It would be careless to imagine all Ice Age humans as larger, stronger, or healthier than all people today. Human bodies varied then, as they vary now. Some people were young, some old, some were injured, some were sick, some were naturally stronger, and some were not. The point is not to turn the past into a fantasy of perfect bodies. The point is to notice that the world itself asks more from the body, more often, and in more directions. Strength was not a special activity separated from life. It was folded into life. To search for food was to move. To follow animals was to move. To gather fuel was to bend, carry, pull, and return. To keep warm was not only to stand near fire, but to find shelter, prepare material, share space, and manage energy carefully. Even rest had a different meaning when the ground, the temperature, and the next day's uncertainty were part of the body's background. In that kind of world, the human body did not have to be trained by choice in the way many modern people understand training. The body was trained by living, not trained perfectly, not safely, and not romantically. It was trained by pressure. It was trained by distance. It was trained by surfaces that did not cooperate. It was trained by hunger that could not always be solved quickly, and by cold that could not always be shut out. It was trained by the need to recover enough to keep going, even when recovery was incomplete. That is why the word strength must be widened before the deeper story can begin. If we only think of muscle size, we miss the more important question. A large muscle is only one piece of a much older system. Ice Age strength also meant balance, grip, endurance, tolerance for discomfort, strong connective tissues, useful coordination, and the ability to use the whole body as one living tool. It meant a body that had regular contact with weight, weather, distance, and risk. It meant a body whose abilities were called upon not once in a while, but repeatedly, because survival did not arrive prearranged. This is where the first quiet mystery appears. The human body today is not a separate creature from that past. Our bones, muscles, joints, lungs, hands, and feet still belong to the same long human story. Yet many ordinary modern bodies become tired after sitting too long, sore after walking farther than usual, stiff after sleeping badly, or strained by movements that would once have been part of daily life. That does not mean modern humans are broken. It does not mean the past was better. It simply means the body remembers a history that the present no longer repeats in the same way. Somewhere behind our comfort is an older design, shaped under older pressures. And before we can ask why that strength faded, we first have to understand what kind of strength it really was. To understand the kind of strength that belonged to Ice Age life, it helps to slow down and imagine one ordinary day without making it dramatic. Not a battle, not a chase, not a scene of constant danger, just a day in which the body has to meet the world directly from the moment it wakes. The ground is not a soft, level surface made for feet. It may be cold, uneven, damp, frozen in places, loose in others, cut by stones, roots, old animal tracks, patches of grass, and shallow hollows that do not announce themselves before the foot lands. A person standing up into that world is already using more of the body than many of us use while crossing a room. The ankle has to notice. The knee has to adjust. The hip has to follow. The back has to keep the body balanced while the head turns, the hands reach, and the eyes search the land ahead. There is no clean border between walking, working, and surviving. A few steps may become a climb. A flat stretch may turn into mud. A small rise may ask the lungs for more air. A carried object may pull one shoulder lower than the other, so the whole body has to quietly reorganize itself around the weight. This kind of movement is not beautiful in the way modern exercise is sometimes made to look. It is irregular. It is practical. It is full of small corrections, and those small corrections matter because they are repeated again and again across years. A body that moves this way does not only build strong muscles in obvious places, it builds a relationship between parts. Feet, calves, thighs, hips, spine, shoulders, hands, and breathing all learn to speak to one another through use. In a modern room, the body can forget many of these conversations. The floor is flat, the chair waits, the temperature is controlled, food may be close, light can be summoned by a switch. The day can be divided into tasks that ask much from the mind and very little from the body. But for most of human history, and especially in colder prehistoric environments, the body was not so easily separated from the day. To gather fuel meant bending, choosing, breaking, lifting, and carrying. To bring back food meant holding, wrapping, balancing, protecting, and often walking back with tired legs. To prepare a place to rest meant arranging material, sharing warmth, watching weather, and accepting that comfort was never complete. Even a quiet day could leave the body with signs of work. Stiff fingers, sore feet, tired hips, a tight back, skin touched by wind, breath slowed by fatigue. We should be careful here. We cannot know every detail of every Ice Age life. People lived in different regions, followed different resources, used different tools, and faced different seasons. Some days were probably slow. Some were dangerous. Some may have been filled with waiting. Some may have been spent close to shelter. The truth is not that every moment was hardship. The truth is that the basic environment did not remove physical demand as thoroughly as our world often does. The body had fewer ways to avoid effort completely. If the weather changed, the body felt it. If food was not near, the body had to move. If something had to be carried, there was no engine quietly taking the burden away. If the ground was rough, the foot had to learn it. This is why ancient strength was not one heroic quality. It was the result of 1,000 small necessities that did not ask permission. The hand grew used to roughness, because the world was rough. The shoulder grew used to uneven loads because objects were not designed for comfort. The legs grew used to distance because distance stood between hunger and food, between cold and shelter, between a group and the next place where life could continue. Over time, these demands would not turn every person into the same body, but they would keep calling on capacities that many modern lives leave untouched. And this brings the question closer to us. When we say humans lost their Ice Age strength, we are not saying that strength vanished from the species like a lamp going out. We are saying that daily life stopped asking for the same kind of strength with the same steady voice. The old world did not train the body through choice or discipline. It trained the body by being there, under every step, in every load, in every cold morning, in every return across difficult ground. The first two things to remove from the mind are exaggeration and nostalgia. The Ice Age was not a time of perfect human bodies, and modern life is not proof that the human body has failed. The truth is quieter than that. It is also more useful. A body becomes good at what it is asked to do often. If it is asked to walk on uneven ground, it becomes more practiced at balance. If it is asked to carry awkward weight, it becomes more familiar with strain. If it is asked to feel cold, hunger, distance, and rough surfaces as part of ordinary life, it develops around those repeated demands. Not every person grows stronger in the same way, and pressure can also injure, weaken, exhaust, or kill. But across a long enough span of time, the daily shape of life leaves a mark on the body. That is the doorway into the mystery. The human body today still carries the deep inheritance of a much older world. We are not a new animal that suddenly appeared after houses, roads, cooked meals, chairs, shoes, machines, and soft beds. Our feet still have arches and small muscles that once met the ground more directly. Our hands still have the ability to grip, pull, press, twist, and shape material. Our backs and hips still belong to an upright animal that solved many problems by moving through space, not by sitting still and thinking about movement from a distance. Our lungs still answer to effort. Our bones still respond to load. Our balance still wakes up when the surface beneath us becomes uncertain. Yet many people now feel tired in a strangely modern way. Not tired from tracking animals across frozen land, or carrying raw material back to shelter, or spending a long day under wind and cold. Tired from sitting too long. Tired from standing in one place. Tired from walking farther than expected on a flat pavement. Tired from lifting something awkward once, when older bodies may have met awkwardness often. A back can ache after hours in a chair. A neck can stiffen under artificial light. Feet can feel weak inside shoes that protect them from nearly everything. Hands can spend more time touching glass and plastic than stone, wood, hide, soil, water, or weight. This is not a reason to shame the modern body. It is a reason to ask what kind of world the body has been placed inside. Because comfort does not only give rest, it also removes certain conversations between the body and the environment. A flat floor no longer asks the ankle to read the ground. A chair no longer asks the hips and spine to hold the body in many different resting shapes. A vehicle no longer asks the legs to cross distance. A handle, a wheel, an elevator, a machine, or a delivery system can take a burden that once would have passed through muscle, tendon, bone, and breath. Each change may seem small by itself. None of them alone explains the whole story. But together, over generations and over the course of daily life, they change what the body must practice. This is where the title becomes less like a claim and more like a question. Did humans truly lose their Ice Age strength, or did the old strength become less visible because life stopped calling for it in the same way? A person who never has to walk far may not know what kind of endurance is still possible. A hand that never grips rough material may not know what it has forgotten. A foot that rarely meets uneven ground may feel clumsy, not because it was made wrong, but because the world beneath it has become too simple. The old strength was not one thing that disappeared in a single moment. It was a pattern of demands. It was cold, distance, hunger, carrying, balance, repair, waiting, recovery, and movement, woven into ordinary days. When those demands changed, the body did not announce a loss. It simply adapted to the new silence. And in that silence, a strange gap opened between the body we inherited and the life we built around it. That gap is where the real story begins, because the question is no longer whether ancient humans were stronger in some simple heroic sense. The question is what happens to a body when the world that once shaped it slowly stops asking for the same strength. There is a difference between strength that is chosen and strength that is required. In the modern world, strength is often treated as something a person adds to life. Someone decides to exercise. Someone lifts a weight, runs a distance, practices a movement, then returns to a life where most of the day may not ask much from the body. That kind of training can be useful, and for many people it is one of the few ways to bring movement back into a quiet life. But it is still separated from survival. It has a beginning and an ending. It happens in a place made for it, at a time chosen for it, with tools designed to measure it. Ice Age strength belonged to a different pattern. It was not scheduled. It was not always intense. It was not always impressive. It was simply built into the demands of staying alive. The body did not wait for a special hour to be used. It was used because the day itself had weight. A person who needed food had to move toward it, search for it, carry it, prepare it, and share it. A person who needed warmth had to gather material, protect fire, make shelter better, and keep the body close enough to safety without being fully removed from cold. A person who needed to travel had to cross whatever land stood between one place and another. This is the first important shift in how we think about ancient strength. It was not just the result of rare dramatic moments. It came from repetition. It came from doing ordinary things in a world that made ordinary things physically demanding. A modern person may lift a heavy object once and feel the body complain for days. But in a harsher landscape, awkward lifting, bending, pulling, reaching and walking were not unusual interruptions. They were part of the background. The load did not always look like a stone carried on the shoulder. It could be a bundle of wood, a skin filled with something useful, a child held close, a toolkit, gathered plants, meat, bone, water, or material for a shelter. These things do not all weigh the same. They do not sit neatly in the hands. They shift. They drag. They require balance. The body has to solve the problem while moving, while tired, while cold, while watching the ground, while staying with others. This is very different from lifting a smooth object in a clean room. The older world did not isolate one muscle and ask it to work. It asked the whole body to cooperate. The legs carried the person forward. The hips stabilized the load. The spine adjusted. The shoulders held. The hands kept contact. The breath followed. Even the eyes and inner sense of balance had to stay awake, because the ground could change under the next step. Over time, this kind of life could make strength less like an event and more like a habit of the body. That does not mean everyone was constantly strong or free from pain. It means the boundary between work and movement was thin. Today, many forms of work can happen with almost no movement at all. A person can sit for hours, solve problems, speak to others, earn money, order food, and cross great distances through screens, vehicles, and systems. The mind may be tired, but the legs may have barely taken part in the day. For much of earlier human life, the body could not be left out so easily. To know the land, one had to move through it. To find resources, one had to reach them. To return with something useful, one had to bring it back. The world trained the body not by giving it perfect exercises, but by refusing to remove effort from necessary tasks. This kind of strength was also slow to form. It was built through many small exposures, not one heroic trial. A child growing up in such a world would learn balance by walking on real ground, not by being told about balance. Hands would learn pressure by handling rough materials. Shoulders would learn the feeling of uneven weight. Feet would learn that no two steps were exactly alike. The body would not call this training. It would call it life. And that may be one reason the loss is difficult to see. When strength disappears from daily tasks, it does not vanish loudly. It becomes unnecessary first, then it becomes unfamiliar. Then, after enough time, it begins to feel almost unnatural to use the body in ways that were once ordinary. The strange thing is that humans did not lose this older strength because they failed. They lost much of the daily pressure that kept asking for it. A safer path, a better tool, a warmer shelter, a stored meal, a smoother surface, a carried object made easier to hold, each one was an achievement. Each one helped human life continue. But each one also changed the questions the body had to answer. The Ice Age body was shaped by a world that kept asking, can you keep moving? Can you carry this? Can you stand the cold a little longer? Can you cross this ground? Can you recover enough for tomorrow? Later worlds would ask different questions, and once the questions changed, the body's answers began to change with them. The land itself was one of the oldest forces shaping the human body. It did not teach gently, and it did not repeat the same lesson every day. One morning the ground could be hard and cold. Another day it could be wet, loose, or broken by stones, roots, shallow streams, animal tracks and slopes that made each step slightly different from the last. We should not imagine one single Ice Age landscape, because humans lived across many regions and climates. Some places were open and windy, some were wooded, some were dry, some changed sharply with the seasons. But in many prehistoric settings, the ground was not arranged for comfort. It was not flat for tired feet. It did not shorten distance. It did not give the body a clean path from one task to the next. To move through such a world, a person needed more than strong legs. The foot had to feel the surface. The ankle had to correct before the mind had time to think. The knee had to bend differently on a slope than on open ground. The hips had to shift weight. The back had to keep the body balanced while the head looked ahead and the hands carried something useful. If one shoulder held a bundle, the whole body quietly changed around that uneven load. This is a kind of strength that is easy to miss because it does not look heroic. It is the strength that keeps a person from falling. It saves energy during a long walk. It lets the body carry weight without losing balance. It helps a tired person keep going when the ground keeps changing underfoot. In a modern life, many surfaces remove these small demands before the body ever meets them. Floors are level, roads are planned, stairs are regular. Vehicles carry both distance and weight. Shoes often protect the foot from texture, cold, sharpness, and uneven pressure. These are real achievements, and they made life safer in many ways. But they also reduce the number of questions the earth asks the body each day. The ankle no longer has to read stone as often. The foot does not need to spread and adjust over rough soil so regularly. The hips do not follow a changing path for hours. Even walking can become a narrow movement, repeated on surfaces designed to make walking simple. Older movement was not always harder in a dramatic way, but it was less predictable. A few steps might cross firm ground, then soft earth, then a small rise, then a patch of mud, then a place where a carried object had to be shifted from one side to the other. Over years, that variation matters. Bodies do not adapt only to how much they move. They adapt to what kind of movement they meet again and again. A body that always meets flatness becomes good at flatness. A body that often meets uneven land becomes familiar with small losses of balance and small recoveries. Weather added another layer. Cold could make the fingers slower. Wind could take warmth away. Wet ground could make walking heavier. Frost, mud, dust, and snow could change the cost of moving through the same place. None of this means ancient people were helpless against nature. They had knowledge, tools, fire, clothing, shelters, and group cooperation. But even with those protections, the body still had to meet the land directly. It had to cross distance, carry material, crouch, stand, climb, wait, return, and recover. Later, as humans shaped more stable places to live, the land did not disappear, but many daily lives became less exposed to it. At first, that would have felt like relief, not loss. Yet when the ground stops asking the body to balance, bend, carry, and adjust so often, the body begins to practice a different kind of life. A great deal of ancient strength may have come from the simple fact that the body could not escape small effort. Not every day had to be extreme, not every movement had to be heavy, but effort was spread through the day in a way that modern life often removes. A person might walk to reach water, bend to gather fuel, squat to work near the ground, pull apart tough material, lift something uneven, carry it back, then stand again, move again, and repeat some version of that pattern the next day. None of these actions alone would look like a great test of power. Together, over years, they formed a steady conversation between the body and the world. The important thing is that the effort was not always chosen. It was attached to ordinary needs. If something useful was far away, the body had to cross distance. If something needed to be moved, the body had to move it. If a shelter needed repair, hands, shoulders, back, and legs had to take part. If the weather changed, the body had to adjust before comfort could be restored. This is different from the modern idea of activity, where movement can be separated from daily survival and placed into a small chosen space. Today, a person may exercise for an hour and then spend the rest of the day carried by chairs, screens, vehicles, smooth floors, stored food, and machines. The older body did not live with that same separation. Movement was not always intense, but it was more often necessary. This kind of necessity shaped more than muscle. It shaped timing, balance, grip, patience, and the ability to do useful things while not feeling completely rested. It taught the body to work in imperfect conditions. A hand might have to hold something rough while the fingers were cold. A foot might have to find stable ground while the eyes watched the horizon. A shoulder might have to carry a load after the legs were already tired. The body learned to continue, not because continuing was heroic, but because the day was not finished. We should be careful not to make this sound beautiful in a false way. Repeated effort can strengthen a body, but it can also wear it down. Ancient life could injure people. It could leave pain, damage, hunger, and exhaustion. The past was not a hidden paradise of natural fitness. Yet the body was asked to remain physically involved in almost everything that mattered. That constant involvement is difficult to recreate once a society becomes good at removing friction from life. A better path saves energy. A sharper tool saves the hand. A warmer shelter saves the body from cold. Stored food saves a long search. A container, a sled, a wheel, an animal, a cart, a vehicle, or a machine can all take over a burden that once passed through human tissue. Each invention is understandable. Each one helps life continue. But when many of them gather together, the body hears fewer old demands. The change does not need to feel dramatic. It can happen quietly, through convenience. First, a task becomes easier, then it becomes rarer. Then the body stops expecting it. After enough time, what once felt ordinary may begin to feel like a special challenge. This is why Ice Age strength should not be imagined as a lost trophy from the past. It was more like a daily language between humans and their surroundings. The land spoke through distance, cold, weight, hunger, and unstable ground. The body answered through movement, balance, endurance, grip, and recovery. As human life became more protected, that language did not vanish all at once. It softened. It grew quieter. And when a language is no longer spoken every day, even a body that still carries its old grammar may begin to forget how fluent it used to be, before strength became something measured in a gym or compared in numbers. It was often a matter of carrying what life placed into the hands. The ancient body did not meet weight only in clean, even forms. It met weight as wood, stone, hide, bone, water, food, tools, children, bedding material, gathered plants, and whatever else had to be moved from one place to another. These loads were not shaped for comfort. They did not always have handles. They did not sit evenly across both sides of the body. They shifted, slipped, dragged, pressed into the skin, and changed the way a person walked. That kind of carrying asked more from the body than simple force. It asked the back to organize itself around an awkward burden. It asked the hips to keep the body moving while one side was heavier than the other. It asked the hands to grip without perfect surfaces. It asked the shoulders to hold tension while the legs still had to cross rough ground. This is one reason Ice Age strength cannot be understood only as the ability to lift something once. A single lift is brief. Carrying is a longer conversation. It includes the first moment of effort, but also the minutes after that, when the arm grows tired, the breath changes, the path bends, and the load still has to arrive somewhere useful. In earlier human life, carrying was tied to survival in a quiet and constant way. If fuel was needed, someone had to bring it close. If food was found, it had to be returned, shared, or prepared. If raw material was useful, it had to be collected. If a group moved, objects moved with them. Even when people stayed near a familiar place, useful things still had weight. The world did not deliver them already arranged. A body had to become part of the transport system. It is important not to exaggerate this into a story where every ancient person was always carrying huge loads. The record of prehistoric life is incomplete, and different groups lived in different ways. But the general principle is simple and well-grounded. Before modern transport, storage, and machines, the human body was more directly involved in moving the things that mattered. That involvement trained the body through necessity. The hands learned the pressure of holding. The forearms learned slow fatigue. The shoulders learned uneven tension. The trunk learned to stabilize while moving. The legs learned that carrying weight changes every step. A load makes the ground feel different. A small slope becomes more demanding. A loose stone matters more. A turn requires more care. Even a modest object can become heavy if the distance is long enough. This is where a different kind of strength appears. Not the strength of one clean effort, but the strength of useful continuation. A person must hold, shift, pause, continue, adjust the grip, change the angle, and keep enough attention for the path ahead. In modern life, many burdens are still real, but they are often broken apart by systems that protect the body from direct load. Bags have straps, carts have wheels, roads are smoother, vehicles carry distance, water comes through pipes, food comes wrapped and delivered. Heat arrives through walls and wires. These changes are not signs of failure, they are signs of human intelligence. Yet each one changes the old relationship between body and burden. When fewer necessary things must be carried by human hands, the body is spared. But it is also asked to practice less. The old strength of the back, hips, grip, and shoulders does not disappear in a single generation as a dramatic event. It becomes less required in ordinary life. And once it becomes less required, it can begin to feel unusual when it returns. A burden in the older world was rarely polite. It did not always rest evenly in the hands. It did not come with a smooth handle, a padded strap, or a shape that respected the shoulder. A branch, a stone tool core, a piece of hide, a bundle of plants, a container of water, or a portion of food could pull the body in uneven ways. One object might be heavy on one side and loose on the other. Another might be light at first, then tiring after a long walk. Something wet might slip. Something rough might scrape the palm. Something long might catch on the ground or brush against the legs. The body had to solve these small problems while already moving through a world that was not level. That is very different from the clean idea of weight we often have today. Modern weight is often designed to be held. A handle tells the fingers where to go. A backpack spreads the load. A wheel removes the need to lift for very long. A flat floor lets the feet work less. Even when something is heavy, the object and the environment often help the person manage it. Earlier burdens were less cooperative. They asked the whole body to adjust at once. If the right hand carried more weight, the left side might open slightly for balance. If the shoulder held a bundle, the spine had to lean without collapsing. If a load shifted, the hips had to answer quickly. If the path dropped or rose, the knees and ankles had to change their work before the person could think about the movement in words. This kind of strength is not only muscular, it is coordination under pressure. It is the ability to keep useful control when the weight, the ground, and the body are all changing together. That matters because ancient strength was not always about producing more force. Often, it was about wasting less force. A person who carries awkward material badly becomes tired faster. A person who learns how to shift, rest, grip, brace, and continue can travel farther with the same body. Over time, the body becomes familiar with little tricks that are not written down. One shoulder rises, a hand changes position, a bundle moves from the arm to the back, the pace slows before a slope, the feet widen on loose ground, the breath changes before the next lift. These are ordinary adjustments, but they are also a kind of knowledge stored in tissue. The hand knows before the mind explains. The back senses when the load is pulling too far forward. The feet look for a better place to land. In Ice Age life, this would not have been a special lesson. It would have been part of making a day work. We should not pretend that this made people invincible. Awkward loads can damage a body. Repeated carrying can wear down joints, strain backs, tear skin, and leave pain behind. The past did not protect people from injury simply because they were more used to effort. But regular contact with real burdens would have kept many parts of the body active in ways that modern life often avoids. The grip had to be more than a momentary squeeze. The shoulder had to be more than a shape. The trunk had to be more than something that sits between a chair and a screen. It had to organize movement while the person carried a piece of the world from one place to another. Later, as tools improved and human spaces became more arranged, the burden did not disappear. It changed form. A better container made carrying easier. A smoother path made distance less costly. A settled place reduced how often everything had to move. Much later, wheels, animals, carts, roads, engines, and machines would carry more and more of what the body once carried directly. Each step was reasonable. Each step made life safer or more efficient. But the body was slowly released from a rough kind of practice. The old lesson of awkward weight grew less common, and with it, one piece of Ice Age strength began to move out of daily life. When tools became better, the body did not suddenly become weak. That would be too simple, and it would also be unfair to the long human story. A sharper edge, a stronger cord, a better container, a warmer covering, or a more stable shelter was not a mistake. Each one was a form of survival. Each one allowed people to do more with less danger, less wasted effort, and sometimes less pain. Human intelligence has always worked partly by moving pressure away from the body. A stone blade can do what teeth and fingernails cannot do well. A carrying sling can save the hands. A container can make water or food easier to move. A shelter can reduce the work of fighting cold with the body alone. Fire can change the night, the meal, and the temperature around a group. None of this means humans became lazy. It means humans became very good at rearranging the world so that the body did not have to meet every problem directly. But once that process begins, it creates a quiet trade. The body is protected, and protection is precious. Yet the body also receives fewer old demands. The load becomes easier to hold, the distance becomes easier to manage, the ground becomes less dangerous when a path is used often. A place that can be returned to again and again means not everything must be carried as far, not every day, not in the same way. Over long stretches of time, these changes can alter what the body practices. The back may not have to organize itself around awkward burdens as often. The hands may not need to grip rough material for as long. The hips and legs may still work, but their work becomes tied to a different rhythm of life. This is not a fall from greatness. It is adaptation. A body always adapts to the world it actually lives in, not the world its ancestors once faced. If daily life asks for carrying, climbing, balancing, and walking under load, the body keeps those abilities closer to the surface. If daily life asks more for sitting, waiting, repeating small motions, or using tools that remove strain, the body becomes familiar with those patterns instead. The strange part is that success can look like loss when we view it from the body's side. A safer life may mean fewer injuries from rough ground, but also less practice recovering balance. A better container may mean less spilled food or water, but also less constant gripping and bracing. A stable shelter may mean more protection from cold, but also less daily exposure to weather as a force the body must answer. A settled place may mean more continuity, but less wide movement across uncertain land. These changes did not happen everywhere at once, and they did not happen in one clean line. Different groups lived in different ways, and many people after the Ice Age still worked extremely hard. But the central pattern is still important. As human life became more buffered by tools, knowledge, and shared systems, the body was no longer the only place where survival strength lived. Some strength moved outward into objects, some moved into skills, some moved into group memory, some moved into fire, shelter, paths, storage, and later into animals, wheels, roads, and machines. What the single body once had to answer alone was increasingly shared with the world humans had built around themselves. So the old strength did not vanish like a broken object. It was slowly displaced. It became less necessary, then less practiced, then less visible. And when a strength is not called into ordinary life, it can remain hidden for a long time, until one heavy load, one long walk, one cold night, or one uneven path reminds the body of a language it has not spoken often enough. The strength of an older human body did not only live in the large places we notice first. It did not belong only to the thighs, the back, the shoulders, or the arms. Some of it lived in smaller places that modern life can make easy to forget. A hand that grips rough wood is not meeting the same world as a hand that mostly touches glass, cloth, plastic, and smooth handles. A foot that feels stone, soil, slope, cold, mud, and uneven ground is not having the same conversation as a foot that spends most of the day inside shoes, above floors built to be flat. Neither body is morally better. One is simply asked different questions. In Ice Age life, the hand was not just a tool for holding objects. It was one of the main ways a person met the world. Hands gathered plants, held cutting edges, scraped hides, shaped wood, lifted stones, pulled fibers, tied material, carried food, steadied the body, and passed useful things to others. A hand had to judge pressure. It had to know when to squeeze harder, when to loosen, when to shift the grip, when to protect the skin, and when to let the wrist, arm, shoulder, and back share the work. That is not just force, it is skill, A strong grip is not only the ability to crush something for a moment, it is the ability to keep contact with something awkward, rough, wet, cold, slippery, or uneven without wasting all the body's energy too quickly. The foot had its own quiet intelligence. It carried the body, but it also read the earth. Each step gave information. Hard ground asked for one kind of landing. Soft ground asked for another. A slope pulled weight forward or sideways. A stone could change the ankle before the mind had time to name what happened. Mud could take away certainty. Cold could make the foot less sensitive. A body moving through such land needed the foot, ankle, calf, knee, hip, spine, and eyes to answer together. Balance is easy to ignore when it succeeds. No one notices the moment a fall does not happen. No one praises the ankle for correcting a small mistake before it becomes an injury. Yet that quiet correction may have been one of the most important forms of older strength. It saved energy. It protected the body. It helped a person carry something while still looking ahead. It allowed movement across difficult ground without turning every step into a struggle. Modern life removes many of these small tests before we even feel them. Floors are smooth, roads are planned, shoes protect the skin, handles tell the fingers where to go, chairs reduce the need to rest in many shapes. Machines take over pulling, grinding, twisting, carrying, and pressing. These changes are useful, and many of them protect the body from real harm. But they also reduce direct contact with roughness. The hand solves fewer textures. The foot reads fewer surfaces. The ankle recovers from fewer small surprises. The grip impulse tested by material that changes in the palm. Over time, a body becomes fluent in the world it repeats. If the repeated world is smooth, supported, and softened, then smoothness becomes normal. The older language of touch, balance, and grip does not disappear in one day. It grows quieter. It waits beneath the surface, like a skill rarely called by name. And when the body finally meets rough ground, awkward weight, cold fingers, or a slipping object, it may feel strangely unfamiliar, not because the body is broken, but because an old conversation has not been practiced often enough. The hand tells a quiet part of the human story. It is easy to think of it as a small thing compared with the legs, the back, or the lungs. But for a creature that survived by making, carrying, shaping, cutting, scraping, tying, throwing, gathering, and sharing, the hand was never small. It was one of the places where strength and intelligence met. A hand could hold a stone edge without losing control. It could press against wood, pull fibre, twist cord, break plants, scrape a hide, grip a tool, lift a bone, carry food, or steady the body against a rock. Each of those actions asked for something slightly different. A cutting tool needed care. A bundle needed endurance. A slippery object needed quick adjustment. A rough surface needed pressure without tearing the skin too badly. A cold morning could make the fingers slower, and the hand still had to work. This is why grip should not be understood as one simple measure. It was not only how hard a person could squeeze, it was how long the hand could stay useful while the world kept changing inside the palm. The thumb had to oppose the fingers, the wrist had to angle itself, the forearm had to hold tension, the shoulder and back had to support the hand's work from behind. In that sense, the hand was connected to the whole body. When a person scraped, pulled, carried, or shaped something, the effort did not stop at the fingers. It travelled upward through the arm, into the shoulder, across the back, down through the hips, and into the legs that held the body steady. A modern hand often lives in a different world. It still works, but much of its work is lighter, smoother, and more repeated in smaller ranges. It touches screens, presses buttons, holds cups, opens doors, types words, turns handles, and moves objects already designed for easy use. These are real skills, and they belong to the world we live in now, but they do not ask the same things from the skin, the joints, the grip, or the arm. A glass surface does not change shape in the hand. A keyboard does not pull back. A plastic handle is not the same as wet wood or rough stone. Even a modern tool often protects the hand from the very roughness that older hands had to understand. This protection is useful. It prevents injury. It saves time. It makes work more precise. But it also means the hand may spend less time solving the kinds of physical problems that once came with daily survival. Archaeology gives us traces of that older relationship, though never a full picture. Stone tools, cut marks on bone, worked hides, plant fibers, ornaments, shelters, and many other remains show that human hands were not passive. They were constantly involved in turning raw material into something usable. We should be careful not to claim that every ancient person had stronger hands than every modern person. That would be too broad. But it is reasonable to say that many earlier ways of life gave the hand more frequent contact with rough, resistant natural materials. Over years, that contact matters. The hand becomes practiced not only in force, but in judgment. It learns the difference between holding and crushing, between pulling and tearing, between cutting and slipping, between carrying safely and wasting strength too soon. When that kind of work becomes rare, the hand does not forget its deep design. It still belongs to a long human past, but its older confidence may sleep. And when it is suddenly asked to grip something rough, cold, heavy, or unstable, the surprise in the fingers may be a small reminder of a world they once knew more intimately. The foot is one of the quietest witnesses to the old human world. It carries the body every day, but because it is usually hidden, protected, and pressed into the same shapes for long hours, it is easy to forget how much it once had to know. A foot in a softer modern life often meets a simple world. It meets flat floors, smooth paths, regular stairs, padded shoes, and surfaces made to remove surprise. But an older foot met the land more directly. It did not always meet bare ground, because humans have long used coverings and protection in different ways. Still, the ground itself was less controlled. Stone, soil, cold earth, roots, mud, slope, frost, sand, grass, and uneven paths all asked the foot to keep listening. The foot was not just a base. It was a sensor, a spring, a brake, a balancing tool, and part of the body's memory of place. Every step on uneven land begins before thought becomes clear. The foot lands. The skin feels pressure. The toes spread or grip. The ankle changes angle. The calf answers. The knee softens. The hip shifts. The spine adjusts. The eyes may already be looking ahead, not down, because the body has learned to trust these small corrections. When this works well, nothing dramatic happens. The person simply does not fall. That may sound like a small thing, but in a world without hospitals, smooth roads, easy transport, or guaranteed rest, not falling mattered. A twisted ankle, a hard fall, or a damaged foot could change the whole day, and perhaps more than the day. So balance was not a decorative skill, it was part of survival. The strength of the foot was not only in pushing the body forward, it was in dealing with change. A slope asks one thing from the heel and another from the toes. Loose stones ask for careful pressure. Mud asks for patience. Cold asks the body to move while feeling less detail. A carried load changes how the foot meets the ground. Fatigue changes how accurately the body places each step. The foot had to work with all of this, quietly and repeatedly. This is why the old strength of the lower body cannot be reduced to thighs or calves alone. It was a chain: foot, ankle, knee, hip, pelvis, spine, breath, and attention. If one part failed to respond, the others had to spend more energy. Modern life often breaks this chain into stillness. The foot is held inside a shoe. The ankle moves through a smaller range. The floor stays level. The chair removes the need to squat, crouch, kneel, shift, and rise from the ground many times. The body is protected, and that protection is valuable, but the cost is subtle. The foot receives fewer messages from the earth. The ankle has fewer small mistakes to correct. The hips have fewer uneven paths to follow. Balance becomes something practiced only when it is challenged, instead of something renewed by ordinary movement. None of this means that modern feet are ruined, or that people should romanticize pain, cold, or danger. It means the body changes according to what it repeats. When the repeated world is flat and softened, the body becomes fluent in flatness. When the repeated world is uneven and alive with texture, the body becomes fluent in adjustment. Somewhere in that difference, a piece of Ice Age strength becomes easier to understand. It was not only power, it was trust between the body and the ground, and as human life slowly moved towards smoother paths, firmer shelters, more protected feet, and less direct contact with wild surfaces, that trust did not disappear completely. It simply had fewer chances to speak. Hunger and cold shaped human strength in ways that are easy to misunderstand. They were not good things in themselves. They could weaken the body, damage health, slow movement, and make every decision harder. A hungry person is not magically stronger. A cold person is not automatically tougher. Too much hunger and too much cold can break a body. So the point is not to praise suffering, or to pretend that ancient hardship was somehow healthy in a simple way. The point is more careful than that. In many earlier human lives, the body had to keep functioning when comfort was incomplete. Food was not always ready at the same hour. Warmth was not always guaranteed. Rest was not always deep or perfectly protected. The body often had to continue while carrying some level of discomfort. That created a kind of strength different from pure muscle. It was the strength of continuing under imperfect conditions. During colder periods of human history, survival depended not only on finding food, but on managing energy. A group could not waste effort carelessly. A long walk, a failed search, a storm, an injury, or a delay in finding resources could change the body's condition very quickly. A person had to learn when to move, when to wait, when to conserve heat, when to share, when to return, and when the next effort was worth the cost. This kind of strength was partly physical, but it was also rhythmic. It came from knowing that the body had limits, and that those limits had to be worked with, not ignored. A modern person may feel hunger as an interruption between scheduled meals. In an older world, hunger could be part of the background of a day. It might rise and fall, it might be mild, or it might become serious. We cannot know the exact experience of every group, and it would be wrong to imagine one universal pattern. But we can say that food uncertainty was a real force in much of human history. The body had to move through uncertainty without falling apart immediately. It had to search, carry, prepare, digest, rest, and begin again. Cold added its own demands. Cold changes how the hands feel, how the skin responds, how the breath moves, and how much energy the body must spend simply staying alive. Clothing, fire, shelter, and social cooperation helped greatly, and humans were not defenseless. Still, protection did not erase the environment completely. A cold morning could make fingers slower, a cold night could make sleep lighter. Wind could turn a short task into a harder one. Wetness could make warmth more fragile. Under these conditions, endurance was not only about distance, it was about remaining useful when the body was not comfortable. This is one part of Ice Age strength that modern life can hide from us. Today, many environments are arranged so the body rarely has to negotiate with temperature, hunger, and fatigue at the same time. Food may be stored nearby, heat may come from a wall, light may continue after sunset. Soft places to sit and lie down are common. These comforts are not wrong, they are achievements. They reduce danger and protect life, but they also change what the body practices. When discomfort appears now, it can feel like an emergency even when it is small, because the body has fewer ordinary conversations with discomfort. Earlier humans did not need to enjoy hunger or cold. They only had to live through changing conditions often enough that the body and the group developed ways of continuing. Some of those ways were physical, some were social, some were learned through memory, habit, and shared knowledge. That is why this older strength should not be imagined as one person silently enduring everything alone. It belonged to bodies, but also to groups, seasons, shelters, fires, tools, and repeated decisions. Hunger and cold did not make humans powerful by themselves. They created pressure. And pressure, repeated across ordinary life, asked the body to become capable of continuing before comfort returned. A body that lives with uncertain food must learn a careful relationship with energy. This does not mean hunger was harmless, or that ancient people were better because they sometimes went without. Hunger can weaken judgment, slow the body, make wounds harder to recover from, and place pressure on the whole group. But in much of human history, food did not arrive with the same predictability that many people know today. There were seasons, migrations, failed searches, changing weather, and days when the best plans still did not bring back enough. In that kind of life, strength was not only the ability to push harder, sometimes it was the ability to spend less. The body had to move, but not waste movement. It had to carry, but not carry carelessly. It had to wait, but not become useless. It had to decide when effort was worth the energy it would cost. That is a quieter kind of endurance, and it sits close to the older human story. Imagine a long day when food is possible, but not certain. The body cannot simply stop because the stomach is empty. Someone may still need to walk, watch, gather, repair, carry, or help another person. The legs may feel heavier, the hands may become slower. The mind may become more focused on what is missing. Still, the day continues. A person does not need to be heroic for this to matter. The body is simply being asked to remain useful before it is fully restored. Over time, repeated uncertainty could shape habits around movement and energy. People would learn routes, seasons, signs in the land, the value of sharing, and the danger of spending too much strength too early. This is where the body and culture become hard to separate. Endurance was not only inside muscle, it was also in memory, timing, cooperation, and restraint. Cold worked in a similar way, though through a different door. Cold makes the body spend energy just to protect its inner warmth. It can make fingers less precise and sleep less easy. It can turn a simple task into a slower one, but humans were not bare animals standing helplessly in wind. They used fire, clothing, shelters, and group closeness. Those things mattered deeply. They reduced danger and gave the body room to survive. Yet even with protection, cold was still part of the world. It could return through the ground, through wet material, through open air, through the long distance between one safe place and another. A person might warm near fire, then step away and feel the body immediately begin to pay attention again. That repeated movement between shelter and exposure helped create another layer of endurance, the ability to keep acting while the body was not fully comfortable. Modern life often separates these pressures. Hunger may be solved quickly. Cold may be solved by a wall, a switch, or a layer chosen from a closet. Fatigue may be answered with a chair. Again, these are not bad things. They are part of the human success story, but they change the training ground. If the body rarely has to move while hungry, cold, tired, and uncertain at the same time, then the older skill of continuing through imperfect conditions becomes less familiar. It may still exist under the surface, but it is not called into daily use. That is why the loss of Ice Age strength should not be pictured only as smaller muscles or softer hands. It also includes a change in tolerance. Not tolerance as a moral virtue, and not suffering for its own sake. Tolerance as the body's practiced ability to remain steady when comfort is delayed. In the old world, comfort was precious because it was not guaranteed. In the newer world, comfort became more available, and the body slowly learned to expect it sooner. Somewhere in that shift, an older endurance began to fade from ordinary life. There is a quiet danger in telling stories about ancient endurance. If we are not careful, we can make hardship sound like a gift. But hunger, cold, pain, and exhaustion were not gifts. They were pressures. Sometimes they shaped the body. Sometimes they damaged it. Sometimes they demanded more than a person could safely give. So when we speak about older strength, we have to keep two truths together. The first truth is that repeated discomfort could make the body more familiar with difficult conditions. The second truth is that difficult conditions could also shorten lives, weaken bodies, and leave scars that no one would choose. The past was not a training ground designed for human improvement. It was a living world where survival had to be negotiated day after day. This matters because Ice Age strength was never just personal toughness. A single body could not answer hunger and cold alone for very long. People survived through knowledge, timing, tools, fire, clothing, shared food, shared warning, and the presence of others. A tired person might be helped. An injured person might still be cared for. A child learned not only by moving, but by watching how older people saved energy, prepared materials, read weather, and knew when to continue or when to stop. In that sense, endurance was not only inside muscle or bone, it was also held in the group. The body carried part of the burden, but memory and cooperation carried part of it too. This is one reason the later loss of older strength is so difficult to describe simply. Humans did not become weaker because they stopped caring about strength. They became better at sharing the work of survival with things outside the body. Fire carried some of the work of warmth. Clothing carried some of the work of protection. Shelter carried some of the work of weather. Tools carried some of the work of teeth, nails, hands, and arms. Knowledge carried some of the work of repeated mistake. A group carried some of the risk that one body could not manage alone. These were not failures. They were some of the deepest human achievements. Yet each success changed the kind of endurance that daily life required. If cold could be pushed back more often, the body did not have to answer cold as directly. If food could be stored, shared, or found through better methods, hunger did not always press in the same way. If shelter became more reliable, sleep and recovery changed. If paths became familiar, movement became less uncertain. Little by little, the body's relationship with discomfort became less constant. The old pressures did not disappear everywhere, and they did not disappear for everyone. Even after the Ice Age, many human lives remained hard, dangerous, and physically demanding. But the direction of the story is still important. Human beings kept finding ways to reduce direct exposure to the world. That is how we survived. That is how children lived long enough to grow. That is how knowledge moved across generations. And in that success, the body slowly practiced a different life. It practiced more protection, more predictability, more stored energy, more help from objects and places. This does not mean the modern body is weak by nature. It means the modern body is often undertrained for the kind of uncertainty that shaped much of its past. A person today may feel shaken by a missed meal, a cold room, a long walk, or a poor night of sleep, not because the body is worthless, but because these pressures no longer arrive as ordinary teachers in the same way. The body adapts to what it repeats. When comfort becomes more regular, discomfort becomes more surprising. And when discomfort becomes surprising, the older endurance feels farther away. So the story of hunger and cold is not a lesson telling us to suffer more. It is a reminder that human strength was shaped by conditions we worked very hard to escape. We should not worship those conditions. We should understand what they asked from us, and what became quieter when we no longer had to answer them every day. A tool is not only an object in the hand, it is a way of moving effort out of the body and into the world. That is one of the oldest and most important things about being human. A sharp stone edge can cut where fingernails would fail. A pointed tool can reach where teeth should not be risked. A cord can hold what fingers cannot hold forever. A container can carry what two bare hands would spill. A shelter can stand against wind in a way skin and muscle cannot. None of these things made humans less human. They made human survival possible in places where the body alone would not have been enough. So it would be wrong to say that tools simply made people weak. Tools were not the opposite of strength. They were one of the forms strength took. The hand that made a tool still needed skill. The body that carried it still needed effort. The mind that understood when and how to use it still needed memory, attention, and judgment. But tools changed the role of the body. They did not remove effort all at once. They redirected it. Instead of tearing with teeth, a person could cut with an edge. Instead of gripping something directly for a long time, a person could tie it. Instead of sleeping fully exposed to weather, a group could build a place that held back some cold and wind. Instead of using raw force again and again, people could use preparation. That shift matters. It means the body no longer had to meet every problem in the most direct way. The pressure was still there, but it passed through stone, wood, fibre, fire, clothing, and shared knowledge before it reached the skin. In Ice Age life, this was not comfort in the modern sense. It was survival technology. It could mean the difference between keeping warm and losing too much heat, between using a carcass well and wasting food, between carrying something useful and leaving it behind. Between danger and a little more safety, the body still worked hard. People still walked, lifted, bent, gripped, watched, waited, and recovered. Yet a new pattern had begun long before the modern world. Human beings were becoming skilled at building buffers between themselves and the raw environment. A buffer is not the same as escape. Fire does not remove winter. Clothing does not erase cold. A blade does not end hunger. A shelter does not make the land gentle. But each buffer changes how much the body must pay directly. This is where the story becomes subtle. The same invention that protects life can also reduce one old form of practice. A better cutting edge asks less from the jaw and fingers. A better covering asks less from the body's own warmth. A better container asks less from the hands. A better shelter asks less from endurance through exposure. These changes are reasonable, and they are deeply human. No living creature chooses unnecessary danger if it has learned a safer way. But over long spans of time, safer ways can change the body's daily education. The body is still capable, but it is asked different questions. Instead of asking only, "Can you force this with your hands?" the world begins to ask, "Can you make something that lets your hands do less?" Instead of asking only, "Can you endure this cold?" it begins to ask, "Can you preserve heat with fire, hide, shelter, and planning?" That is not weakness. It is intelligence spreading outward. Still, as intelligence spread outward, some older demands moved farther away from the flesh. A part of Ice Age strength remained in the body, but another part began to live in objects, habits, and shared techniques. And once strength begins to live outside the body's own role slowly changes. A tool does not have to remove work completely in order to change the body. It only has to make the old work slightly different. A sharp edge does not mean the hand stops working, but it changes the kind of work the hand must do. A cord does not mean the arm stops carrying, but it changes how a load can be held. A container does not mean the body no longer moves food or water, but it changes the shape of the burden. A shelter does not mean cold disappears, but it changes how directly cold reaches the skin. These small changes matter because the body is shaped by repeated details. If the same task becomes a little easier, and that easier version is repeated for many seasons, the body begins to live inside a different set of demands. In the older world, a person might still walk far, bend often, carry weight, and work through fatigue, but the pressure was no longer only raw pressure. It had been filtered through invention. A blade could divide material before the fingers had to tear it apart. Fire could soften food before the jaw and gut met it. A hide covering could hold warmth before the body lost too much of it. A prepared sleeping place could make rest a little less exposed. A familiar tool could make one task quicker, safer, and less costly than it would be with the body alone. This was one of the great human advantages. It allowed people to survive in places where strength alone would not have been enough. Still, every advantage changed the conversation between body and world. Before a good tool, the body may have had to pull harder, chew longer, grip more tightly, strike more awkwardly, or endure more exposure. After a good tool, the same goal might still require effort, but the effort was reorganized. The body did not stop being important. It became part of a larger system. The hand worked with stone. The shoulder worked with cord. The back worked with a container. The skin worked with clothing. The breath worked with fire and shelter nearby. Strength began to spread out. Some of it stayed in muscle, tendon, bone, and balance. Some of it moved into objects that could be carried, repaired, copied, taught, and improved. This movement of strength outward is easy to miss because it looks like progress, and in many ways it was progress. A person who cuts better wastes less energy. A group that stores better may face fewer desperate days. A shelter that holds warmth may protect children, older people, and the injured. These are not small things. They are part of why human life continued. But from the body's point of view, progress also changes practice. The hand that no longer has to fight every material directly may lose some contact with resistance. The jaw that meets softer food may face different demands across generations. The skin that is better covered may be spared, but also less often tested by cold. The back that uses containers and shared methods may still work hard, but not always in the same rough, uneven way. None of this happened at one moment, and none of it happened the same way everywhere. Human groups used different tools, lived in different climates, and followed different patterns of movement, but the direction is important. The more humans learned to prepare the world before the body touched it, the less the body had to meet the world in its rawest form. That is not a simple loss. It is a trade that sits at the center of human history. The body was protected so life could continue, yet the protection also meant that some old tests became less frequent. Over time, what had once been ordinary effort could become occasional effort. What had once been daily contact could become rare contact. And what had once been a familiar strength could begin to feel like something from a colder, harder past. The strange thing about tools is that they protect a body while also hiding part of what the body used to do. At first, nothing seems lost. A better edge cuts cleaner, a better handle saves the palm, a better covering holds warmth, a better shelter makes the night less dangerous. These are clear gains. No one looking at them from inside the struggle of survival would call them a problem. They would call them skill, memory, care, and intelligence. But when a tool succeeds, it also changes the question being asked of the body. The old question may have been, can your hands pull this apart? The new question becomes, can you hold the tool well enough to let the edge do the harder work? The old question may have been, can your skin and body endure this cold? The new question becomes, can fire, clothing, shelter, and shared planning hold back enough of the cold for the body to continue? This is not weakness. It is the beginning of a larger human body, one made not only of flesh, but also of objects, habits, and knowledge. Yet the flesh still changes when the questions change. A hand that works with tools may become skilled in precision, timing, and control, but it may not face the same raw resistance as often. A back that uses a better carrying method may still work, but the weight reaches it in a different way. A foot that follows a more familiar path still walks, but it may meet fewer surprises from the land. Across one day, these differences may seem too small to matter. Across a lifetime, and then across many generations of changing habits, they become part of the story. This is where the loss of Ice Age strength becomes difficult to name. It was not a single strength disappearing from a single body. It was a rearrangement. The body gave some tasks to the blade. It gave some tasks to fire. It gave some tasks to clothing, shelter, containers, paths, and the hands of other people. A person still needed effort, but effort was now shared with the made world. That made human life more survivable. It also made some older forms of strength less necessary. If a task no longer demands the same grip, that grip may still exist, but it sleeps more often. If cold is pushed back more successfully, cold endurance is not called up every day. If weight is carried with better methods, the body does not practice quite the same awkward burden. If food is prepared before it reaches the mouth and stomach, the body meets a softened version of the world. None of this means humans declined in a simple line. In many ways, humans became more powerful. A group with tools could do what bare hands could not. A group with fire could enter nights and climates that would otherwise be far more dangerous. A group with shared knowledge could survive not because each body was perfect, but because the group remembered what no single body could discover alone. But that is exactly the quiet paradox. Human beings became stronger as a species by making each individual body less alone. The world outside the skin began to carry more of the burden. So when we ask whether humans lost their Ice Age strength, the answer cannot be only about muscle. It has to include this outward movement of strength. The old body was not simply replaced by a weaker body. It was surrounded by a growing human world. And inside that world, some ancient abilities no longer had to speak as loudly as before. Fire changed the human relationship with cold, food, darkness, and time. It did not make life easy, and it did not remove danger from the Ice Age world, but it gave people a way to push back against the raw environment, instead of meeting it only with skin, teeth, hands, and muscle. Near fire, cold air was still present, but it was no longer the only force in the night. Meat, roots, seeds, and other foods could be changed before they entered the mouth. Material could be hardened, softened, dried, warmed, or made more useful. A group could gather around light after sunset, repair tools, share food, watch one another, and keep part of the world under human control for a little longer. This was not a small shift. It was one of the deep changes in the human story. But like many human achievements, it carried a quiet trade. Fire helped the body survive, and at the same time it began to reduce some of the direct demands that the older world placed on the body. A cold night without fire asks one thing from the body. A cold night with fire asks another. The body still has to endure. It still has to gather fuel, protect the flame, stay close, and manage heat carefully. but the full burden of warmth is no longer carried by metabolism, clothing, body position, and group closeness alone. Some of that burden has moved outward, into flame, shelter, and shared attention. Food changed in a similar way. Cooking does not mean the body stops working, it means the food reaches the body in a different condition. Tough material can become softer. Some foods become easier to chew. Some become safer or more useful after heat changes them. This matters because eating is not only pleasure, it is labor. The jaw works, the teeth work, the gut works. The body spends energy making food usable. When fire begins part of that work outside the body still receives nourishment, but it no longer faces the same raw challenge in exactly the same form. We have to be careful not to turn this into a simple claim that cooking made humans weak. That would be too crude. Cooking may have helped human beings access energy more effectively and survive in difficult places. It belongs to the rise of human intelligence, cooperation, and culture. But it also shows the pattern that keeps returning in this story. Humans become powerful by moving pressure away from the body and into the world they make. A flame does part of what cold once forced the body to do. A cooked meal does part of what teeth, jaw muscles, and digestion once had to do alone. A warm shelter does part of what endurance once carried through the night. These changes did not erase Ice Age strength in a moment. They made survival more layered. The body was still important, but it was no longer the only battlefield where the world was met, and this is where the older strength begins to look different. If food is softer more often, the jaw and mouth live under a different pressure. If heat is held closer, cold endurance is called differently. If darkness is pushed back, the rhythm of evening changes. If fire becomes a center for group life, the body's strength is joined to memory, planning, fuel gathering, social cooperation, and learned skill. Strength has not disappeared. It has been redistributed. Some remains in muscle and bone. Some moves into heat, tools, technique, and shared habit. From the inside of history, this redistribution would not feel like loss. It would feel like survival becoming wiser. Yet from the body's long memory, every softened meal, every warmer night, every protected hour near fire, may have been one more small step away from the older condition in which the body had to meet the world more directly. Food is one of the quietest places where human strength changed. At first, it seems far away from the idea of Ice Age strength. We usually think of strength as walking, carrying, lifting, gripping, or enduring cold. But food decides what the body has to do before strength can even appear. A body cannot move, repair, stay warm, or continue through a hard day without energy. And the way food reaches the body matters. Raw, tough, fibrous, or hard food asks more from the teeth, jaw, hands, and digestion. Food that has been cut, pounded, softened, heated, or shared in smaller prepared forms asks something different. This does not mean one kind of food is always better, or that ancient diets were all the same. Human groups ate many different things in different places, but the wider pattern is clear enough to matter. As humans became better at preparing food outside the body met food in a less raw form more often. Cooking is part of that story, but it is not the only part. Cutting meat with stone tools changes what teeth must do. Cracking, grinding, pounding, drying, soaking, roasting, or softening plant foods changes the work of the mouth and gut. Fire adds another layer by changing texture, taste, safety, and the energy the body can draw from some foods. These are not small details. Chewing is work. Holding food is work. Tearing is work. Tearing is work. Tearing. Digesting is work. When more of that work happens before the food enters the mouth, the body is being helped. That help may have been one of the great reasons humans could support larger brains, cooperate around meals, care for children, and survive in hard environments. But help also changes pressure. A jaw that often meets softened food is not living under the same demand as a jaw that must regularly break down tougher material. Teeth that depend more on tools and preparation meet a different world from teeth used as the first tool. Hands that cut, scrape, pound, and cook are still working, but they are moving part of the burden into technique. The body is not weaker in a simple sense. It is being reorganized around a smarter way of surviving. Over very long periods, these shifts can leave traces in the human body. Scientists often discuss changes in jaw size, tooth size, face shape, and the role of food processing with care, because no single cause explains everything. Climate, diet, development, genes, tools, cooking, and culture all overlap. So we should not say that one invention alone made the human face or body change. But it is reasonable to say that food preparation changed the daily forces passing through the mouth, hands, and digestive system. This brings us back to the older strength in the title. Ice Age strength was not only the strength to carry a load, it was also the strength to live in a world where food was not always softened, measured, packaged, and ready. The body had to help turn the world into nourishment. Later, as tools, fire, and shared preparation did more of that work, the body was spared some of the old effort. From the human point of view, this was a victory. A prepared meal meant less wasted energy, more safety in many cases, and more time for the group to gather, learn, and survive. Yet from the body's point of view, the pressure had changed again. The jaw had fewer old battles. The teeth met less raw resistance. The gut received food already transformed. The hand still worked, but more through skill than brute force. So the loss was not a collapse. It was a quiet exchange. Humans gained a cooked, prepared, shared food world. And in that world, one more layer of raw physical demand moved away from the body and into culture. The more humans learned to prepare the world before touching it, the less the body had to meet the world in its rawest form. Fire shows this clearly because fire changes things before they reach the skin, the mouth, the hands, and the stomach. It takes cold air and creates a small circle of warmth. It takes darkness and gives people a place where they can still see, speak, repair tools, prepare food, watch one another, and wait through the night. It takes tough food and changes its texture. It takes raw material and makes some of it easier to bend, dry, harden, soften, or use. Around fire, the human body was still living in a difficult world. Wind still existed, hunger still existed, injury still existed, distance still existed, but the body was no longer alone inside those pressures. A part of the work had moved outward, into flame, into practice, into memory, and into the shared habits of the group. This is one of the deepest patterns in human history. Humans did not become powerful only by becoming physically stronger. They became powerful by learning how to place layers between the body and the most direct force of the world. A stone edge is one layer, clothing is another, shelter is another, fire is another, prepared food is another. A group that remembers where fuel can be found, when animals move, how weather changes, and how food should be handled is another kind of layer. Each layer protects life. Each layer makes survival more possible. But each layer also changes the kind of work the body has to do. The world no longer arrives as pure cold, pure hardness, pure darkness, or pure resistance. It arrives partly softened, partly warmed, partly cut, partly held back, partly understood before the body has to answer it. This was not a failure. It was the reason human life could continue in places where the body alone would have been too vulnerable. It helped children survive. It helped the injured remain within the group. It gave older people a chance to pass on knowledge. It allowed skill to accumulate beyond a single lifetime. Still, from the body's side, something important was changing. If cold is answered more often by fire, shelter, and clothing, the body does not have to answer cold in exactly the same way each night. If food is cut, roasted, pounded, softened, or shared in prepared pieces, the jaw, teeth, hands, and gut do not meet the same raw resistance as often. If darkness becomes a gathering place instead of only a boundary, the rhythm of evening changes. If a protected space can be returned to, the body's relationship with risk, rest, and recovery changes. None of these shifts erased older strength in a single moment. They simply made the old strength less necessary in its original form. The body was relieved, and relief matters. Relief means less danger. Relief means less waste. Relief means a child can sleep warmer, a tired person can recover a little more, a meal can be shared with less effort, and a group can hold together through a difficult season. But relief, repeated over time, can become a new normal. What once required direct physical negotiation begins to be handled by preparation. What once pressed into muscle, tooth, skin, bone, breath, and balance begins to be shared with flame, tool, shelter, and habit. That is why the loss of Ice Age strength should not be imagined as a sudden weakening. No one sat beside a fire and felt ancient power leaving the body. No one ate softened food and sensed a deep physical pressure fading away. From inside the moment, these changes would have felt like intelligence, care, and survival. But across the longer story, they show how strength slowly moved from the body into culture. Humans became stronger as a species by making the world less brutal before the body had to face it. And because of that success, some older forms of endurance, chewing, gripping, warming, waiting, and recovering were called upon less often. The body still carried the memory of harder conditions, but it lived more and more inside a world shaped by human hands. An older strength did not need to disappear completely. It only had to become unnecessary often enough that it slowly grew quiet. Human strength was never only the strength of one body standing alone. That is one of the easiest mistakes to make when we imagine the deep past. We may picture a single person facing cold, hunger, distance, animals, injury, and darkness with nothing but muscle, courage, and will. But humans did not survive mainly as isolated bodies. A lone body is fragile. A tired person can make a poor decision. An injured foot can slow a journey. A sick child cannot protect itself. An older person may not move quickly, but may remember where water was found, which plants appeared after a certain season, how a tool should be repaired, or when the weather was beginning to change. The strength of humans has always been partly individual and partly shared. In Ice Age life, that shared strength would have mattered deeply. People could hunt together, gather together, carry together, warn one another, watch children, keep fire alive, share warmth, prepare food, repair tools, and remember places across time. A group could hold knowledge that no single body could carry alone. This does not make the body less important. It makes the body part of something wider. One hand could grip a tool, but another hand could pass material. One person could carry a load for a while, then another could take it. One tired body could rest, because other bodies were still awake. One injured person might survive because the group did not immediately lose all use for them. We have to be careful here. Ancient groups were not perfect circles of kindness. We should not imagine every prehistoric community as peaceful, wise, and gentle at all times. There would have been fear, conflict, loss, hunger, and difficult choices. But the broader point remains strong. Human beings are social animals, and survival was often a group problem before it was an individual achievement. Cooperation made humans stronger than any single body could be. It allowed effort to spread. It allowed knowledge to outlive one person. It allowed children to learn by watching, listening, copying, and being corrected. It allowed a useful method to be remembered, refined, and passed on. The body still had to work. Legs still crossed difficult ground. Hands still shaped stone, wood, hide, plant fiber, and bone. Back still carried. Skin still felt cold. Stomach still waited through uncertain hours. But the whole weight of survival did not always fall on one person alone. That is a very important part of the story. Ice Age strength was not only muscle under stress. It was a network of bodies supporting one another against a world that no body could fully control. A person could be strong, but a group could be strong in another way. A group could divide work. Someone could watch while someone else slept. Someone could remember a route while someone else carried material. Someone could notice danger while another person focused on a task. Someone could help care for the young, the injured, or the weak long enough for them to remain part of the human story. In this sense, cooperation did not replace physical strength. It surrounded it. It made individual strength more useful and less lonely. But it also began to change the pressure on each body. If a task could be shared, one person did not always have to carry the whole burden. If knowledge could be passed down, one person did not have to learn everything through painful trial. If a group could protect fire, shelter, food, and children together, survival became less dependent on one body being strong at every moment. This was one of the great human advantages. It was also part of the quiet shift behind the title. As cooperation became more central, Some strength moved away from the isolated body and into the group itself. The group became a kind of living tool. It could store memory. It could distribute effort. It could protect weakness. It could make survival less dependent on perfect physical power. That was not a decline. It was a triumph. Yet from the body's point of view, triumph can still change practice. The species became stronger by sharing effort, but each individual body no longer had to answer every old demand alone. Somewhere in that shared life, Ice Age strength did not vanish. It began to change shape. A group can make a person safer without making the world easy. That is the balance we need to keep in mind. Cooperation did not erase hunger, cold, injury, distance, or danger. It did not turn Ice Age life into comfort, but it changed how those pressures reached each body. A person who was tired did not always have to solve the next problem alone. A child could be carried, watched, fed, taught, or warmed by more than one pair of hands. Someone who knew a place, a season, a material, or a method could pass that knowledge to others. A wound, a mistake, or a weak day did not always mean the end, because human survival had begun to include care, memory, and shared effort. This is one of the most important differences between human strength and simple physical power. An animal may be strong in its own body. A human group can be strong across many bodies. One person may have better eyesight. Another may have better hands for making. Another may remember routes. Another may notice tracks, weather, plants, or small changes in the land. Another may be skilled at carrying, repairing, preparing food, or keeping children close. Strength becomes distributed. It no longer sits in one place. It moves through the group as attention, skill, warning, patience, and help. This kind of shared strength would have mattered in a world where no single body could be good at everything all the time. The body still had to carry its share. It still had to move, lift, bend, wait, endure, and recover. But the group could soften some of the sharpest edges of survival. Shared food could reduce the danger of one failed search. Shared warmth could make a cold night more survivable. Shared watching could let someone sleep more deeply for a while. Shared knowledge could prevent repeated mistakes. Shared care could keep the injured, the young, and sometimes the old inside the circle of life a little longer. We should not make this sound sentimental. Cooperation is not always gentle. Groups can also create pressure, conflict, exclusion, and hard obligations. But even with those realities, the human pattern is clear. Survival became less dependent on one body doing everything alone. That changed the meaning of strength. A strong person was useful, but a strong group was something larger. A strong group could hold fire, food, tools, memory, protection, and learning across time. And as that happened, some of the demands that once pressed directly on individual bodies began to be shared. This is where the story connects again to the loss of Ice Age strength. The more a group can help carry life, the less each individual body has to carry every pressure in its rawest form. If someone else can help carry a load, your back is spared. If someone else can keep watch, your body can rest. If knowledge has already been learned, your body does not have to pay the cost of every mistake. If tools and food preparation are shared, your hands and teeth and stomach do not have to meet every material in the hardest possible way. These changes are not signs of weakness. They are signs of what made humans unusually successful. But they also mean that some older forms of personal endurance became less constant. The body did not have to be the only storehouse of survival. Memory could live in stories, skill could live in teaching, safety could live in numbers, warmth could live around fire, food could live in sharing. Strength itself began to live partly outside the skin. Over time, this would become one of the great directions of human history. The individual body remained important, but it was increasingly surrounded by other bodies, objects, habits, and knowledge. That surrounding world protected the body, and protection allowed more people to survive. Yet protection also changed practice. The more life was held by the group, the less often one body had to face every old demand alone. In that quiet shift, Ice Age strength did not simply disappear. It became shared, softened, and spread out across human life. There is a quiet paradox at the center of human strength. The more humans learned to live together, the stronger the species became, but the less each single body had to stand alone against the world. This was not a failure. It was one of the reasons humans survived. A body by itself is limited. It can grow tired, cold, hungry, injured, confused, or afraid. But several bodies together can divide attention. One person can carry while another watches. One can remember while another searches. One can rest while another stays alert. One can teach what another has not yet learned. Across time, this made human life less dependent on raw individual power and more dependent on shared patterns. Ice Age strength, then, was never only a private possession inside muscle and bone. It was also something that moved between people. A fire kept alive by a group was strength. A route remembered across seasons was strength. A child kept warm by more than one person was strength. A tool-making skill passed from hand to hand was strength. A warning given before danger arrived was strength. These things did not make the body irrelevant. They made the body more likely to survive long enough to be useful again tomorrow, but they also changed the pressure on that body. When survival depends entirely on one person, every weakness is dangerous. When survival is shared, weakness can sometimes be absorbed by the group. That is a deeply human achievement. It means that the injured, the young, the tired, and the old were not always outside the story. In many cases, they could remain within it because other people carried part of the burden. We should not turn this into a soft picture of perfect ancient kindness. The past was not simple, and human groups could be harsh. But the existence of care, teaching, and cooperation is not sentimental fantasy. It is part of what made humans human. The strange result is that the body's strength began to live in a wider place. It lived in arms and legs, yes, but also in memory, trust, timing, shared labor, and learned habits. The group became a second body around the individual body. It could hold knowledge that one person might forget. It could continue work when one person stopped. It could protect fire, children, food, tools, and stories across more than one lifetime. From the viewpoint of survival, this was power. From the viewpoint of the individual body, it was also a release. The body no longer had to be the only answer to cold, hunger, danger, distance, and uncertainty. Some answers came from other people, some came from objects, some came from remembered places, some came from repeated customs. In this way, human beings did not simply lose strength, they relocated it. A strength that once had to appear directly as grip, endurance, balance, or pain tolerance could also appear as cooperation, planning, care, and shared memory. That is why the story cannot be reduced to ancient people were strong and modern people are weak. The truth is more layered. Humans became stronger together while some older demands on the solitary body grew less absolute. Later, as settlements, food storage, tools, paths, shelters, and social systems became more complex, this pattern would continue. The individual body would still matter, but it would be surrounded by more help than before. And every layer of help would make life more survivable while also making certain old strengths less necessary every day. This is the quiet shift beneath the title. Ice Age strength was not destroyed. It was shared outward. It moved from one body into many bodies, then into tools, memory, shelters, and ways of living. And once strength no longer had to remain only inside the flesh itself began to live under a different sky. When the Ice Age began to loosen its hold, the world did not simply become easy. That is important to understand. A warmer world was not automatically a gentle world. Ice sheets retreated in some places. Seas rose. Rivers changed. Forests expanded or shifted. Grasslands moved. Animals followed new patterns. And human groups had to keep adjusting. Some familiar hunting grounds may have changed. Some coastlines disappeared under rising water. Some regions became wetter, others drier, and the useful map inside human memory had to be redrawn again and again. So the end of the Ice Age should not be imagined as a door opening into comfort. It was another kind of uncertainty. But the pressure on the body was beginning to change shape. The cold, open, demanding landscapes that had once called on certain kinds of endurance, movement, carrying, and heat management were no longer the same everywhere. In some places, people found themselves moving through thicker vegetation. In others, they followed different animals, gathered different foods, used different tools, or stayed longer near places where water, plants, fish, or seasonal resources could be found. The old strength was still useful, but the world was no longer asking for it in exactly the same voice. This is one of the slowest changes in the human story, and because it was slow, it would not have felt like a clear break. No one woke up one morning and became a different kind of human. Bodies still walked, hands still made tools, feet still crossed rough ground, backs still carried useful things. Hunger, cold, injury and distance still existed, but the pattern of daily life was shifting. A body shaped by wide movement across difficult land might now meet more varied local resources. Of reason, a group that once depended heavily on following large animals in open landscapes might now rely more on mixed foods, seasonal gathering, fishing, small game, or plant processing depending on where they lived. We should not force one story onto all people, because human life after the Ice Age was diverse, but that diversity itself matters. As environments changed, human strategies multiplied. And when strategies multiply, the kind of strength required from the body also multiplies. It becomes less tied to one old pressure and more tied to place, season, tool, and habit. This is where the loss of Ice Age strength becomes less dramatic but more believable. It was not that humans suddenly became weak after the climate warmed. It was that the body was no longer being trained by exactly the same environment. A colder, open world asks for one kind of endurance. A forested world asks for another. A river or coastal world asks for another. A more settled, seasonal camp asks for another. Strength does not vanish when conditions change. It specializes, softens in some areas, sharpens in others, and follows the new problems of life. Over long periods, that means certain old capacities become less central. The ability to keep moving across cold exposed land may matter less in a place where food can be found within a more familiar range. The ability to endure long stretches of raw exposure may matter less when shelter, fire, clothing, and local knowledge are more developed. The ability to carry everything across large distances may matter less when people return to known places, store more, or use better containers. Again, this is not a story of decline, it is a story of changing demands. The body was still human, still old, still carrying the deep inheritance of earlier survival, but the world around it was becoming different enough that the old strength no longer received the same daily invitation. And when a strength is not invited as often, it does not need to disappear. It only needs to become less necessary than it once was. A changed climate does not only change the weather, it changes the routes people walk, the animals they follow, the plants they know, the places they return to, and the kinds of work that fill an ordinary day. After the coldest periods of the Ice Age began to pass, many human groups had to live through a world that was rearranging itself. Land that had once been open could grow thicker with trees or brush. Places that had once been dry could become wetter. River systems could shift. Coastlines could move as sea levels rose. Animals that had once been common in one area might become harder to find, while other foods became more important. For the body, this meant that strength did not disappear, but it was asked to serve different tasks. A person moving through dense woodland needs a different kind of movement from a person crossing open cold ground. A person gathering shellfish, fishing, collecting plants, trapping small animals, or returning to seasonal resources does not use the body in the same pattern as someone travelling long distances across exposed land. The legs still work, the hands still work, the back still carries, but the rhythm changes. The old world may have demanded long endurance, cold tolerance, wide movement, and the ability to carry across distance. A new local environment might demand patience, careful gathering, tool repair, repeated short trips, digging, processing, sorting, or staying near a place that becomes useful at certain times of year. This is one of the reasons we should not speak about human strength as if it had only one form. A body can be strong for open land and less practiced in thick forest. It can be strong for distance and less practiced in staying low for long periods. It can be strong for carrying and less practiced in fine repetitive work. It can be strong for cold and less tested by it when warmth, shelter, and a milder climate change the day. Human strength follows the shape of human life. When life changes, strength changes with it. That is why the end of the Ice Age was not a simple release from hardship. In some ways, new environments may have brought new difficulties. More plants could mean more food in some places, but also more knowledge needed to use them safely. Rivers and coasts could offer resources, but also new dangers and seasonal limits. Thicker landscapes could hide movement and make travel slower. A warmer world could still bring hunger, injury, disease, storms, and uncertainty. But the body was no longer living inside exactly the same training ground. The old pressure of cold open distance was no longer the main teacher everywhere. Other teachers appeared. Water, forest, marsh, coast, valley, season, and settlement began to ask their own questions. Over time, these questions changed how bodies spent their days. A group that returned again and again to a reliable place might not need to carry everything across such wide distances. A group that knew seasonal foods might plan movement differently. A group with better containers, better tools, and stronger local memory could reduce some of the random cost of searching. None of this means life was easy. It means the work became more specific. Instead of one broad image of ancient toughness, we have to imagine many kinds of human effort, shaped by many landscapes. And somewhere inside that diversity, the Ice Age kind of strength began to lose its central place. It was still useful in hard moments. It could still appear in long travel, cold weather, heavy carrying, injury, hunger, and danger. But it was no longer the constant background of every human life in the same way. The body did what bodies always do. It followed the demands in front of it. As those demands became more local, more seasonal, more buffered by tools and knowledge, the older strength did not vanish. It became one possibility among many. Rather than the daily condition of being human, the old pressure did not leave the human body all at once. It faded unevenly, like a sound moving farther away across a wide landscape. In some places, cold remained a serious force. In others, the climate softened. Some groups still traveled widely. Others returned more often to rivers, coasts, valleys, or seasonal camps. Some people still carried heavy loads across difficult land. Others began to rely more on familiar places, stored materials, repeated routes, and resources that could be gathered at certain times of year. This is why we should not imagine a single moment when Ice Age strength ended. There was no clean border where one kind of human body stopped and another began. There were only changing lives, changing places, and changing habits. The body kept answering what the world asked from it, but the questions were no longer the same everywhere. A colder, more exposed world had once asked for a broad kind of toughness. Long movement, heat management, balance on rough ground, carrying through distance, and endurance through uncertainty. After the climate shifted, many of those abilities still mattered, but they did not always sit at the center of daily life. New environments asked for different strengths. A river might ask for patience, timing, and skill with tools. A coastline might ask for knowledge of tides, shellfish, fish, weather, and safe return. A forest might ask for careful movement, local memory, and different kinds of gathering. A more settled place might ask for repeated labor near home, repair, processing, storage, and social organization. None of these were easy, but they were not the same as moving again and again through cold open land under the older pressures. The human body did not become weak because the world changed. It became more specialized to the life in front of it. That is a quiet but important distinction. A body can lose one kind of strength while gaining another kind of skill. A person who no longer walks great distances every few days may become very good at processing food, making tools, carrying water, digging, building, weaving, or caring for animals and children. A group that moves less widely may become better at knowing one place in great detail. The loss of Ice Age strength, then, was not an empty loss. It was part of a trade. The body gave less attention to some older demands because life began to demand other things. Over many generations, that trade could feel almost invisible. No one would need to say that the old strength was gone. A child born into a warmer, more settled, more locally organized life would simply grow up practicing the movements that life required. The body would learn the new ground, the new tools, the new foods, the new distances, the new risks. What had been ordinary for earlier people might become unusual later, not because people became foolish or soft, but because ordinary life had moved somewhere else. This is one of the clearest ways to understand the title without turning it into a false judgment. Humans did not lose their Ice Age strength because history made them worse. They lost much of its daily necessity, and when necessity fades, practice fades with it. The old body remains under the new life, but it is not called upon in the same way. A hand still can grip, a foot still can balance, a back still can carry, lungs still can answer effort. But if the world no longer asks for these things as often, they wait quietly beneath easier routines. That waiting is the beginning of the modern feeling that something ancient is still inside us, but farther from reach. The Ice Age did not leave a clean ending behind. It left a body carrying old possibilities into new worlds, where those possibilities were no longer always needed, but never fully erased. When some human groups began to live more settled lives, the body entered another kind of change. This did not happen everywhere at once, and it did not mean that life suddenly became easy. Early farming and more permanent settlements could be physically demanding, sometimes harsh, and in many places linked with new pressures on health, diet, disease, and labor. People still worked hard. They dug, planted, harvested, carried water, processed grain, built shelters, repaired tools, tended animals, stored food, and lived close to others in ways that brought new risks. So this is not a story where wandering people were strong, settled people became comfortable, and history moved in a simple downward line. The truth is more complicated and more interesting. Settled life did not remove effort. It changed the shape of effort. A person who moves widely across land uses the body in one rhythm. A person who works near fields, homes, storage places, animals, and repeated paths uses the body in another. The old demands of long movement, cold exposure, shifting camps, and carrying through uncertain terrain did not vanish completely, but they were no longer the center of life in the same way for many communities. In their place came new forms of repetition, bending over plants, grinding food, carrying water from the same source, lifting stored material, repairing walls, roofs, fences, baskets, tools, or containers, walking familiar paths, working through seasons that could bring abundance at one time and shortage at another. This kind of life could be exhausting, but exhaustion is not the same as Ice Age strength. A body can work very hard and still be trained in a narrower pattern than before. That is the key difference. The older mobile life may have asked the whole body to answer changing ground, changing loads, changing weather, and changing distance. A more settled life could ask for more repeated labor in more familiar spaces. The hands might become very skilled at grinding, weaving, cutting, binding, shaping, or sorting. The back might become used to bending and lifting in the same place again and again. The legs might still work, but often within a more defined landscape. The body was not idle. It was being trained by a new order of life, over generations. That matters. A child born into a settled community would not grow into the exact same movement world as a child born into a highly mobile foraging group. The ground under daily life would be different. The distances would be different. The tools would be different. The food would be different. The dangers would be different. The body would still be human, still carrying deep older possibilities, but it would practice a different set of answers. This is one reason the loss of Ice Age strength should be seen as a slow reshaping rather than a collapse. Strength did not disappear. It moved into other habits. It moved into endurance for repeated labor, into skill with crops or animals, into the patience of storage, into the discipline of staying near one place, into the social effort of living with more people. But some older demands grew quieter. The wide movement across uncertain land became less central in some places. The need to carry everything through distance became less constant. The daily contact with wild terrain, cold exposure, and unpredictable resources changed. Human beings gained new security, new food systems, new social possibilities, and new ways to survive hard years. But the body paid for that new order by practicing a different life. It did not become weak overnight. It became familiar with a world that asked less often for the broad, rough, whole-body strength shaped by colder, older landscapes. Settled life gave the body a different kind of heaviness. It was not the heaviness of always moving toward a new camp, or following animals across open ground, or carrying everything useful through uncertain distance. It was the heaviness of return, the same water source, the same storage place, the same field edge, the same grinding stone, the same shelter wall needing repair, the same path walked so often that the feet knew it before the eyes had to study it. This repeated world could still be hard. A person might spend long hours bending, lifting, pounding, digging, scraping, carrying, sorting, weaving, cutting, or repairing. The body could become tired in deep and ordinary ways. Hands could ache, backs could strain, knees could stiffen, shoulders could carry water, wood, grain, tools, or children. But the pattern of effort was changing. Instead of a body being shaped by many kinds of movement across changing land, it might be shaped more by repeated tasks in familiar spaces. This matters because repetition can build strength, but it can also narrow strength. A person who repeats the same movement every day may become very capable in that movement, while losing regular practice in other kinds of movement. A back used to bending over work may not be the same as a back used to carrying uneven loads across slopes. Hands used to grinding, sorting, or weaving may become skilled and enduring, but they are answering different questions from hands that must grip wet wood, rough stone, animal hide, or a shifting bundle during travel. Legs that walk between home, field, water, and storage still work, but they may not meet the same wide range of distance, ground, and uncertainty that older mobile lives often required. The difference is not between hard life and easy life. It is between one kind of hard life and another. Early settled communities could face serious pressures. Food could depend heavily on seasons. Stored grain could fail. Crowded living could bring disease. Diet could become less varied in some places. Work could become more repetitive and socially organized. These were not small costs. So it would be wrong to say that settled people simply became soft. Many were laboring constantly. But the older Ice Age kind of strength was tied to a broader relationship with the wild world, walking through unpredictable land, carrying what was needed, enduring weather, adjusting to shifting resources, and meeting rough surfaces with the whole body. Settled life began to place more of the body inside a made environment. Even when that environment was simple, it was still more arranged than the open land. Paths became known, tools stayed nearby, food could be stored, work could gather around home, field, hearth, water, animals, and other people. The body still carried the ancient inheritance, but it was being trained by a new rhythm. A child growing up in this rhythm would learn the weight of repeated labor more than the uncertainty of wide movement. The body would know where to go for water, where food was kept, where work happened, where rest happened, and where the group gathered. This kind of order protected life. It made planning possible. It allowed more people to remain in one place. It helped memory become attached to land, seasons, buildings, tools, and inherited work. Yet the same order also meant that some older tests became less frequent. The body did not have to read new ground every day. It did not have to carry every useful thing across long distances often. It did not have to follow changing resources in the same way. Strength remained, but it was being pulled into narrower channels. The Ice Age body had been shaped by a wide, rough world. The settled body was increasingly shaped by repeated labor inside a human-made pattern. And slowly, without a single moment of loss, the older strength moved farther from ordinary life. The change from mobile life to more settled life did not remove strength from human bodies. It changed where strength was needed. A person in an early farming or settled community could still work from morning until night. The body might bend over fields, carry water, lift stored food, grind grain, repair shelter, cut wood, shape tools, tend animals, prepare meals, and repeat the same tasks again when the next day came. This was not a soft life. In many places it may have placed heavy strain on the body, but the strain was different from the older pattern shaped by wide movement, uncertain ground, cold exposure, and constant adjustment to a changing landscape. The older kind of strength was broad. It asked the feet to read new surfaces, the legs to cross distance, the back to carry uneven weight, the hands to grip rough materials, and the whole body to keep working when food, weather, and shelter were not fully secure. Settled life could be hard in a narrower way. It often asked for repetition, patience, and endurance in familiar spaces. A person might become very strong at grinding, digging, harvesting, weaving, lifting, or carrying along known paths, but those abilities were not exactly the same as the rougher strength of moving through open, changing land. This is how an older strength can fade without anyone noticing. It does not fade because people stop working. It fades because work begins to train different habits. The body listens to what daily life repeats. If the day repeats bending in one place, the body learns that. If the day repeats carrying water from the same source, the body learns that. If the day repeats processing food, repairing tools, and moving between shelter, field, storage, and hearth, the body learns that. These are real forms of effort, but they are not the same as a life where distance, terrain, cold, and changing resources constantly reshape the body's tasks. This distinction matters because it keeps the story honest. We are not saying that settled people became weak. We are saying that a different life began to write itself into the body. In some regions, early agriculture may have brought new nutritional pressures, more repetitive labor, closer contact with disease, and heavier social demands. In other places, the change was slower, mixed with gathering, hunting, fishing, and seasonal movement. There was no single human path. Still, across much of the long story, settled life made the world around the body more arranged. Paths became familiar. Tools could stay near home. Food could be stored. Work could be organized around repeated places. Children could grow up inside a more predictable map of daily tasks. That predictability helped communities survive, but it also softened some older uncertainties. The body no longer had to be ready for the same range of movement every day. It still needed strength, but not always the old broad strength that came from being pulled in many directions by a rough environment. Over generations, this shift would have been almost invisible from inside life. People would simply do what their world required. They would not think of themselves as losing an Ice Age inheritance. They would think of planting, carrying, storing, repairing, feeding, protecting, and enduring the work in front of them. But from far away, we can see the pattern more clearly. Human strength was being exchanged, not erased. The strength of wide movement gave way in some places to the strength of repeated labor. The strength of raw exposure gave way to the strength of managed seasons. The strength of carrying through uncertain land gave way to the strength of staying, building, storing, and returning. This was one of the great turns in human history. The body remained ancient, but the life around it became more organized by human hands. And as the world became more arranged, the old Ice Age strength slowly lost its place at the center of ordinary life. As human life became more organized, strength did not disappear. It changed address. Some of it remained in the body, in hands, legs, backs, lungs, bones, and balance. But more and more of it began to live outside the body, in things humans made and in ways humans remembered. A sharp tool was not just a sharp tool, it was stored effort. It meant the hand did not have to tear everything directly. A shelter was not just a place to sleep, it was stored protection. It meant the body did not have to face every wind, every cold night, and every exposed hour with skin and endurance alone. A path was not only a line through land, it was stored memory. It meant future steps could follow what earlier feet had already learned. A container was not only an object. It was a way of making food, water, fuel, or material easier to move. Slowly, human strength became less like one body pushing against the world, and more like a whole system helping the body survive. This is one of the great shifts in the human story. A person with a useful tool can do work that bare hands cannot do well. A group with shared knowledge can avoid dangers that one person would have to discover painfully. A community with stored food can soften the sharp edge of a bad day, though never remove risk completely. A shelter, a fire, a path, a set of tools, and a memory passed from older people to younger people can all hold strength in a form that is not muscle. From the viewpoint of survival, this was a triumph. It meant humans were not limited only by what one body could carry, cut, remember, endure, or repair in a single moment. It meant effort could accumulate. One generation could leave behind techniques, habits, objects, and places that the next generation did not have to invent from nothing. But from the viewpoint of the body, the same triumph changed the daily lesson. The body was still needed, but it was surrounded by help. A hand still worked, yet the edge did part of the cutting. A back still carried, yet the container organized the burden. Feet still walked, yet a familiar path reduced some uncertainty. Skin still felt cold, yet fire, clothing, and shelter answered part of the weather. The body became part of a partnership with the made world. That partnership made life more possible, but it also made some older demands less constant. This is why the loss of Ice Age strength cannot be understood as simple weakness. Humans did not merely become worse at surviving. They became better at moving survival into systems. Strength moved into tools, routines, places, language, teaching, and cooperation. A person could be physically less exposed, and yet belong to a species that had become far more powerful. That is the paradox. The human group could cross harder boundaries, live in more places, protect more vulnerable people, and pass on more knowledge, while the individual body no longer had to face the raw world with the same directness every day. Over long periods, the body listened to that change. It still carried ancient possibilities, but many of those possibilities were called less often. The hand did not have to grip every material in its roughest state. The jaw did not have to meet every food before preparation. The legs did not always have to cross unknown ground. The back did not always have to carry through long distance without help. Strength became more intelligent, more social, more technical, and more distributed. Something was gained that no Ice Age body alone could have held, but something also became quieter inside the flesh. The stronger the human system became, the less the single body had to carry the whole world by itself. This is one of the quietest reversals in our history. In an older and more exposed life, the body met the world more directly. The hand gripped rough material, the foot read uncertain ground, the back carried what had to move, the skin felt cold before shelter and fire could answer it, the stomach waited when food was not ready. But as tools, shelters, paths, storage, language, and shared knowledge became more important, survival began to spread outward. A person did not have to hold every answer in muscle and bone. Some answers could live in objects. Some could live in the group. Some could live in memory. Some could live in habits repeated so often that they became a culture. This did not make humans weaker as a species. It made humans far stronger. A single person can forget, but a community can remember. A single hand can tire, but a tool can preserve the shape of a useful action. A single body can become cold, but a shelter can hold warmth for many. A single person can fail to find food, but a group can share risk across more than one search, more than one skill, and more than one season. This is why human power became so unusual. It did not stay trapped inside the body. It became distributed. It moved into fire, clothing, containers, paths, stories, teaching, stored food, planned work, and the hands of other people. Yet this same success changed the body's daily education. When a task is shared, each person may still work, but the work no longer presses in the same way. When a tool carries part of the burden, the hand still acts, but the hand is no longer alone against the material. When a path becomes familiar, the foot still walks, but the land has already been partly understood. When food is stored, hunger may still come, but it does not always arrive with the same immediate force. When a shelter holds back weather, the body still feels the season, but not with the same exposure. These changes seem small when taken one at a time. Together, they reshape what the body must practice. The old strength of direct contact becomes less central. A body surrounded by systems can still be strong, but it is strong in a different arrangement. It may rely more on tools than grip, more on storage than long searching, more on roads than raw terrain, more on shared labor than solitary endurance. None of this is a failure. It is how humans protected life. It is how children survived more often, how knowledge lasted longer, and how communities became able to face problems that no single body could solve. But from the viewpoint of Ice Age strength, something had shifted. The individual body no longer had to be the first and final answer to every cold night, every heavy load, every difficult surface, every hunger, every danger, every uncertainty. The species became powerful by building a world that could help the body. And once that help became part of ordinary life, the body naturally adapted to being helped. It practiced less of some older demands, not because those demands were impossible, but because they were no longer constant. This is the hidden trade inside human success. We became stronger together, but some of the older strength inside each body had fewer reasons to remain awake. The deepest paradox is that humans became more powerful, while the individual body became less exposed to the forces that once shaped it. A person surrounded by tools, shelter, stored food, fire, paths, other people, and shared knowledge is not weaker in any simple sense. That person belongs to a stronger human world. The group can remember more than one mind. Tools can hold the shape of past effort. A shelter can stand through the night even when the body is sleeping. A path can guide feet because earlier feet have already paid part of the cost. Food stored in one season can soften the hunger of another. These things are strength, but they are strength outside the skin. They make the species more capable. They also change what the single body has to practice every day. This is why the old Ice Age strength did not need to disappear through failure. It could fade through success. The hand no longer had to meet every material in its roughest state. The foot no longer had to read unknown ground as often. The back no longer had to carry every useful thing across uncertain distance. The body no longer had to answer cold, hunger, darkness, and danger with flesh alone. Some of those answers moved into fire. Some moved into shelter. Some moved into tools. Some moved into memory. Some moved into the people standing nearby. From the outside, this looks like progress, and it is. But inside the body, progress can feel like a quiet lowering of old demands. A skill that is not used often does not vanish at once. It becomes harder to reach. A strength that is no longer required every day does not announce its departure. It simply becomes less familiar. The body adapts to the new questions life asks. If life asks for sitting, the body becomes practiced at sitting. If life asks for repeated small motions, the body becomes practiced at those. If life asks for smooth floors, planned roads, warm rooms, soft food, and carried burdens made lighter by systems, the body becomes fluent in that world. This is not shameful. It is biology doing what biology does. The body is always listening to its environment. The Ice Age body listened to cold ground, long distance, rough material, uncertain food, and the need to recover before comfort was complete. The later human body listened more and more to tools, shelters, repeated places, prepared food, group protection, and organized work. One world called out broad physical readiness. The other called out different skills. The result is not a simple fall from strength into weakness. It is a relocation of strength. Human strength moved from muscle into method, from endurance into planning, from raw contact into preparation, from solitary effort into shared systems. Something enormous was gained. Human beings could protect the vulnerable, carry knowledge across generations, live in more places, and build forms of safety no single body could create alone. But something older became quieter at the same time. The body no longer had to be ready for the raw world in the same constant way. It could rely on what humans had built around it, and after enough time, the body began to feel at home in that reliance. That is the hidden answer beginning to take shape. We did not lose Ice Age strength because humans suddenly became less human. We lost much of its daily necessity because we became very good at surviving without asking the body to bear everything directly. The old strength remained as possibility, as memory, as a buried language in bone, muscle, balance, breath, and grip. But possibility is not the same as practice. And when practice fades from ordinary life, even an ancient ability can begin to feel distant. The modern body is not separate from the ancient body. It is easy to forget this because the world around us looks so different now. We wake in rooms that hold temperature better than open ground. We walk on floors, roads, stairs, and paths designed to reduce surprise. We sit in chairs that take much of the work away from the hips, legs, and spine. We eat food that has already been cut, cooked, softened, packaged, transported, stored, or delivered through systems too large to see. We move through a human-made world that carries distance, weight, heat, light, and information for us. And yet, underneath that world, the body is still old. The foot still has arches, small muscles, tendons, and nerves that can read the ground. The hand still has the thumb, fingers, wrist, and grip of a creature that shaped material long before machines did most of the shaping. The spine still belongs to an upright animal that once solved many problems by moving, lifting, bending, crouching, turning, and carrying. The lungs still answer to effort. The bones still respond to load. The body still becomes different when it is used differently. This is why modern tiredness can feel so strange. A person may not be crossing frozen land or carrying fuel across a long distance. They may be sitting for hours, standing in one fixed place, walking on flat pavement, looking at a screen, sleeping poorly, or moving too little in too narrow a range. The body becomes tired, but not always from the kind of effort it was shaped to understand. It becomes stiff from stillness. It becomes sore from repetition. It becomes weak in movements that daily life no longer asks it to practice. It may feel fragile, even though it is not broken. It is simply living in a world that has become very good at removing the old tests. This does not mean we should reject comfort or romanticize hardship. Warm rooms, safe food, medical care, tools, transport, and shelter are not mistakes. They protect human life. They allow people to survive illness, injury, childhood, old age, difficult seasons, and dangers that earlier humans had to face with fewer layers of help. The point is not to wish ourselves back into Ice Age conditions. The point is to understand the mismatch more honestly. The body carries an inheritance from a long past, but it is often placed inside a present that asks for very little of that inheritance. A hand that rarely grips rough material still has the design to grip. A foot that rarely meets uneven ground still has the ability to adjust. A back that spends long hours supported still has the deep history of carrying and balancing. But when these abilities are not called often, they grow quiet. They do not vanish like something cut away. They become less familiar, less trusted, less awake in ordinary life. This may be why the story of lost strength feels personal even though it is historical. It is not only about people who lived thousands of years ago. It is about the body listening to its environment right now. If the environment is soft, supported, smooth, warm, and predictable, the body learns that life. If the environment once was cold, rough, uneven, uncertain, and physically demanding, the body learned that life too. We are living with the same deep human body, but inside a very different conversation. The Ice Age did not leave us as a memory in words alone. It left us with a body that still carries old possibilities, even when the world no longer asks for them every day. It would be too easy to say that modern humans are simply weaker. It would also be too harsh, and not fully true. The modern body is not a failed version of the ancient body. It is a living body, responding to the world it has been given. If that world asks for long sitting, the body becomes practiced at sitting. If it asks for short walks on smooth floors, the body becomes practiced at smooth floors. If it asks for screens, repeated hand motions, soft shoes, stable temperatures, easy food, and work done through tools and systems, the body learns those patterns. This is not laziness written into the bones. It is adaptation. The body is always adapting, even when we do not notice. The problem is that the modern world often asks the body for too little variety and then surprises it with sudden demands. A person may sit for many hours, then lift something awkward and feel a sharp reminder in the back. They may walk little for days, then feel exhausted after a longer distance. They may spend years on flat ground, then feel clumsy on a rough path. They may live in steady warmth, then feel unusually shaken by cold. These experiences can feel like personal weakness, but they also reveal a larger historical gap. The body still carries older possibilities, while daily life often gives those possibilities very little practice. This gap should be understood carefully. It does not mean every modern person is physically unprepared in the same way. Some people work hard with their bodies every day. Some walk, lift, carry, farm, build, clean, repair, climb, or stand for long hours. Some modern lives are still physically demanding. And ancient lives were not always stronger, healthier, or better. There were injuries, disease, hunger, loss, and bodies worn down by hard conditions. The past does not deserve worship. The present does not deserve contempt. What matters is the pattern. Over a long stretch of human history, more and more pressure moved away from the individual body and into the world humans built. That world protected us. It gave us shelter from weather, storage against hunger, tools against raw material, transport against distance, and shared systems against uncertainty. But by protecting the body, it also changed what the body regularly had to do. A body that once met the ground, weight, cold, hunger, and distance through daily life may now meet them rarely, indirectly, or only in controlled forms. So, when we ask why humans never got their Ice Age strength back, the answer may not be that the strength is impossible. It may be that the old conditions that kept calling it forward no longer surround most people in the same way. Strength needs a reason to stay near the surface. Balance needs uneven ground. Grip needs rough objects. Endurance needs distance and repetition. Cold tolerance needs exposure, though exposure itself can be dangerous and should not be romanticized. The body becomes fluent in what it is asked to speak. If the world stops speaking the old language, the body does not shout back in that language forever. It grows quiet. This is why the loss feels almost invisible. It is not a dramatic fall. It is a silence made by comfort, safety, tools, habits, and time. And in that silence, the modern body can feel strangely disconnected from the ancient body it still is, not broken. Note, not inferior, just living under different demands, carrying old capacities that have fewer chances to wake. Maybe the real value of this story is not that ancient humans were better, or that modern humans are worse. That would be too small a lesson for such a long history. The deeper lesson is that the human body is not separate from the world around it. It becomes familiar with the life it repeats. A body that meets cold, distance, rough ground, hunger, carrying, and uncertainty every day learns one kind of strength. A body that meets chairs, screens, smooth floors, warm rooms, prepared food, vehicles, and tools learns another. Neither body exists outside its environment. Neither body can be understood alone. The Ice Age did not create a perfect human form, and the modern world did not create a ruined one. Both are part of the same long human story, shaped by pressure, invention, relief, and time. What changed was the conversation between body and world. Earlier, humans had to answer the raw environment more directly. Their feet answered the ground. Their hands answered rough material. Their backs answered weight. Their lungs answered distance. Their bodies answered cold, hunger, injury, waiting, and recovery with fewer layers of protection. Later, humans learned how to move some of those answers outward. Fire answered some of the cold. Tools answered some of the resistance. Shelter answered some of the weather. Containers answered some of the carrying. Stored food answered some of the uncertainty. Community answered some of the danger of being alone. Roads, animals, machines, medicine, and modern systems continued that movement. More and more, survival strength spread beyond the skin. That is why humans became extraordinary. Not because every individual body became stronger in the old way, but because the human world became strong around the body. This was a gain. It protected children. It helped the injured. It allowed knowledge to survive death. It let people live in places where one body alone would not last. But every gain has a shape. When the world grows safer and softer, the body no longer practices some older abilities as often. Balance can grow quiet without uneven ground. Grip can grow quiet without rough material. Endurance can grow quiet without distance. Tolerance can grow quiet when discomfort is always removed quickly. The loss is not punishment. It is not weakness as a moral failure. It is the natural result of a body listening to a different world. So perhaps the question is not whether we can return to Ice Age strength. We cannot return to that world, and we should not pretend that hunger, cold, danger, and pain were gifts. Our ancestors worked, suffered, adapted, cared for one another, and survived under conditions many of us would not choose for a single day. The respectful thing is not to romanticize their hardship. The respectful thing is to understand what their world asked of the body, and what our world no longer asks. In that understanding, the modern body becomes less mysterious. Its tiredness, stiffness, weakness, and restlessness are not signs that it has betrayed us. They may be signs that it still carries an older history while living inside a newer arrangement. It is a body made from deep time, placed inside soft light, straight roads, warm rooms, and quiet machines. Somewhere inside it, old capacities remain, not as a command to suffer, but as a reminder that the body is alive, adaptable, and shaped by what it does each day. Humans lost much of their Ice Age strength because they became skilled enough to build a world that no longer demanded it constantly. And yet the body still remembers, in small ways, when the hand grips, when the foot searches for balance, when the lungs open under effort, when the back carries something real, when the skin feels the weather again. So as we rest inside the comfort our species built, one question remains open in the dark. How much of that older strength is truly gone, and how much is only waiting for a world that no longer calls its name?